Probably a little bit ahead. We might take one or two questions before Richard, if that would be okay. Could I ask one? What particular software is in this area, is in this area at the moment in the market? Is there any particular software that would assist?
There's a lot of, I suppose, Union Squares and you could SharePoint or ERP systems purport to have knowledge management functionality in them, but I think it's a lot to do with what's existing in the company. I don't think there's any software system per se that's going to...
I came across one recently, Liquid Knowledge in the UK.
No.
I suppose it's some piece of technology that would help to capture relevant information and make it available promptly to recipients,
Yeah, a lot of the companies developed things themselves or used the existing intranet and developed pages or systems through that. Then they didn't really find anyone that had actually bought a system off the shelf that
I
fit.
guess one of the key problems is that it was like building a website. It quickly gets out of date and irrelevant. So how do you manage that? How do you keep it sort of relevant and up to date?
I suppose it depends who's managing it. Some of the bigger companies had a resource there. There was a team of people feeding information continuously onto the website or whatever to keep it up to date. But generally, I suppose it's the onus on the people that are going to be using it, that while some people may be taking information out or knowledge out, that equally they should be contributing to the system and again linking it into existing activities, linking it into performance management, etc., and encouraging people to contribute to it in a positive way is really the main thing to do.
So what's the difference between knowledge management and an intranet?
I would say an intranet is a focal point for knowledge management, but it's not knowledge management. Knowledge management's bigger than IT on its own, I think. And maybe I shouldn't be saying it here at a CITA meeting, but there's a lot more to it. And I think knowledge management or an intranet is useful for capturing knowledge as information and acting as a repository, but really it's what you do with that information and how you follow on with that, maybe finding contacts or finding people with particular expertise and then making the personal connection is really what it's about.
Yeah, I think you could say, you could say that the intranet is kind of a toolbox with all kinds of tools in, and KM is just one of the tools. So, in our intranet we've got the HR management system where people have access to their personal records and they can do stuff like timesheets and holiday requests and so on. And then we've got our access to our quality management system, so you can rapidly access individual forms for different systems and so on. And then the KMS, as we call it, the knowledge management part, is a module of that's accessible. So the intranet is kind of the structure that pulls the whole thing together.
If you think about extranet, people will pay for knowledge that gives them a competitive advantage. Think of, like, for example, CIS Ireland. You heard of Construction Industry Services. These are the people who provide knowledge about tenders on the island and in the UK. People are going to pay for that. So on the one hand, you've got knowledge management internally, but if you can provide sort of relevant, up-to-date knowledge to businesses that will help them be smarter in the way they work, it could be a business opportunity there, no? I don't know.
From just going through we've just come out of the knowledge management hell on the weeks back, and like all of the other systems we've looked at, knowledge management is 80% people and process, is 20% technology. Technology is a small component. I mean, it's crap in, crap out. I mean, a lot of companies are using simple things like wikis and blogs to manage knowledge, where you can go in and it can be moderated and edited by several people or different people in the organisation. I mean, a lot of knowledge is tacit and it can't be tracked, it can't be captured. So you're using the likes of lessons learned and communities of practice to try and transfer it. There's no one system, there's no panacea. I mean, you can't create knowledge from thin air. I mean, it's data which has been filtered and turned into information, and it's information then given context, which makes it knowledge. So there is no one system, but a lot of companies are using wikis and blogs and that. And there's a good report by a guy called Bartholomew. It was published in 2005 on knowledge management in the UK, and he looked at design practices, engineering and architectural design practices, and how they knowledge management. and he discusses wikis and blogs and lessons learned and yellow pages and stuff like that. So I mean, it's worth having a look at.
I think one of the things that we found is that it's all very well to have the knowledge there, but to get people to use it and access it is another thing, and that's where the point you made at the head of your presentation, Brian, about leadership from management.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there needs to be a management championing of it, that if somebody asks you, how do you do so-and-so, your first answer shouldn't be to tell them. The first answer should be, have you looked in the KMS? And not enough people do ask that, because people have a lot of stuff in their own heads. The initial reaction is to tend to just give the answer or point to the guy next door who has the answer, whereas very often there is stuff in the KMS that would save everybody's time if you just said, look in the KMS, do a quick search and you'll find something there, and if you don't, come back to me, you know. And that's where management have a major role to play.
Okay, I think there'll be maybe one more, then we'll move on, because there'll be another opportunity towards the end for more questions. Yes, Pat?
Just during your study, looked at a lot of the big companies in Ireland. Did you look at all about kind of smaller companies? And obviously, I presume when you get smaller in the companies, the knowledge management systems are kind of decreasing size and the way they're managed and stuff. As you get down to kind of 5, 10, 15 kind of people offices, is there anything you noticed or anything you see for SMEs or even bigger than that?
Didn't necessarily kind of diminish it. I talked to a company in Kerry, a design office. There was, I think, 15 people in it, and they had quite a sophisticated system developed online, an intranet. But it was actually, I suppose, going back to the previous comments there, it was a conglomeration of all their existing systems, quality management, design management, document management, all these things came together, and they had actually, even Engineers Ireland signalled them out as being quite innovative in how they managed it, but it was very much, because there was such a small number of people, it was process based, and they were able to manage and see where people were contributing, where they, you know, checking things on the KMS rather than going, you know, looking elsewhere or whatever, where they're using that first, and they were actually able to manage it quite well because of the size of the company. So I didn't think there was any big difference there. I suppose some of the other technologies, you need the critical mass, like a people finder obviously isn't going to be terribly relevant in a smaller company. I think it's really trying to fit in with what's there at the moment and looking at, you know, what have you got in place and what potential is there. I don't think there's any point in going off and buying a big glitzy system if that's purporting to do everything for you, if it doesn't really fit in with the culture of the organisation. Or, you know, wikis and blogs are all well and good, but if the people in your company aren't comfortable with those kind of things, or, you know, aren't really into that, then it's possibly not going to work either. So it's trying to match your situation, I think, to
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Brian.
Thanks very
Okay. So we move on to our debate opportunity. Thank you very much, Brian.
Richard, how many people are involved specifically in maintaining and sort of encouraging people to go along with the knowledge management maintenance?
We don't have a central group. If I use knowledge management, I suppose, in the broader sense, we have a couple of people in our quality group who would look after the QMS and, say, the KMS, the older KMS. We have the technology team site who would be promoting and pushing out the new, call it the wiki site. So it's not a single group of people. I think if you want to get knowledge management working in any organisation, it's like anything, if you want to get it moving, you have to have a couple of enthusiastic individuals. And because of the variety of knowledge bases that we have, we've had to, I suppose, get enthusiastic, appropriate people in each of those areas. So I can't say we have a knowledge management department, we don't.
So outside of IT, there are no specialists involved full-time on it?
There's no specialists. And it was mentioned earlier that like IT is important, but it's only an enabler. Like, we're in the people business, that's the reality. And that to us is the core. So IT is purely an enabler. So the IT guys would support what we do, they don't lead it.
Yeah, it's basically a responsive. So, for example, the HR system is run by the HR department, and they only call for help if there's a technical issue. And similarly, the majority of the PSA system, the Aggresso system, is actually run by the finance group, because it's primarily about financial management with inputs from the projects group. But it's very much the operational people, as Richard says, that actually own each of the systems, and the IT guys are clearly there to make sure that the equipment works properly. And you know, the IT guys would be kind of looking at at what's out there in the market and maybe looking at better ways of making the system run, but the management of the whole thing is really operational.
My own background, I'm in PM quite a number of years, but I would have operated inside the engineering, the projects, then the information systems. I've been operations manager before in Cork. I'm fulfilling an operations role, say, for Western Europe. But back in 2005, 2006, I was actually asked to take on kind of a management role in bringing the document management system into play, the whole PSA, the Aggresso system. So for a period of time, I was kind of the central piece linking a lot of these other groups. And the trick at the time was to find the right people. So yeah, I suppose my strategy was beg, borrow or steal the right person to get that particular area moving.
Yeah. Sorry, John.
Richard, a very, very interesting presentation. Could you briefly comment on how you take a system as complex as this, and when you're dealing with alliance parties who presumably have an equivalent but not the same system in their organisation, how do you deal with that on alliance-based projects?
It depends on the way, on the particular setup. Like by and large, the systems we have set up are for us and for our projects, and there's no linkages with an alliance partner. Alliance partners can be set up in, I suppose, in two ways for us. One could be a strategic partner, which will cover a multitude of jobs, or one could just be on a pure project basis. So by and large, there's no interaction with our systems and alliance partners. However, we have an alliance, or not an alliance, but we have a JV with one particular company, and we're probably going to set up a separate instance of our financial and accounting system. So it's just a particular instance to handle the JV. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
No, I can see what you're basically saying is you actually have to set up a mini KM system for an alliance.
Well, we wouldn't set up a KM system because, again, that's our knowledge.
Of course, I'm only using the word.
But on the financial end, everything it's similar. It's for us. It doesn't go outside of PM. We don't bring in alliance partners, except in the case where we might have a JV. But then we'll set up a specific instance.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Just a question for Brian and Richard. Just the future of knowledge management and the impact of semantic web, or have you any views on that? I mean, we've done bits and pieces of work on ontologies and the semantic web and how information sort of at the moment, the current version of the web information is done. A PC looks at a file and it sees a file name and it sees a date and it sees a file size. The person looks at it and has to interpret it. Semantic web is where systems and software agents start interpreting files and getting context and more dynamic search in that. Any views on where?
The extent, I suppose, that we're going to in PM is we have very powerful search capabilities, but it's only of our own information. We haven't looked any further than that, and I think with the amount that we have to do in joining our own dots, I don't think we look further yet.
Well, it's even for you guys, the whole semantic end of it. You're working in several markets, so you might have a term in Germany for window compared to the Irish term for window or fenestration or whatever, and the semantics and ontologies, from what I understand, come into play in translating concepts and terms between different jurisdictions and different areas. Or if you had a QS working on a project in Dubai who was measuring using the principles of measurement international, compared to the Home Office where they're using ARM4, and you want to transfer stuff over and back. Well, I mean, the semantic web and ontologies come into play in that instance. Or have you come across it, Brian, or have you any opinions on the semantic web and the knowledge management?
You've come across it all right, but I haven't really seen any evidence of it in practice or being in use. But I think, even Richard says, you're still getting to grips with getting the basics right, I think, is where a lot of companies are. And I'd imagine in construction that's probably a step too far for a lot of people, you know.
I just have maybe a quick observation. In Bolton Street, we had Tom Costello in every year for an annual lecture. And it's interesting to track the last 4 years of the CISC experience. They've gone from, 80% turnover in Ireland, 20% overseas, the 30% Ireland and 70% overseas. And they, I understand, have just recruited a new change manager, knowledge manager. Really, what Tom was talking about before Christmas was about reinventing the business and reinventing the way that they capture international work. So the idea I think a lot of businesses, whether they're micro businesses or larger businesses, want relevant information as to how they can enter these new markets and how they can join forces with other businesses. Well, I think that could be something that CITA could try and capture, the network that we're trying to develop, that we could try and maybe give guidance to the members as to, how you can, what's involved in entering various jurisdictions.
Absolutely, and as we move into different jurisdictions now, we're realising that the typical package that you would give contractors in Ireland, design packages, is different to what you give in Belgium. Yeah. Which is different to what you give in France.
But they also work a lot smarter. A lot of these businesses in Europe, they actually are, very CAD savvy. They're using building information modelling tools. If anything, they're ahead of us. They're ahead of us when it comes to our knowledge of IT.
In some ways, but I think that the makeup of their business can be different as well. A lot of the contractors abroad would have a stronger design capability, and you would take design to a certain point, and then the contractor will pick it up. And it varies from jurisdiction. Like, there isn't sort of a one fix that suits all. It varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
One quick
Yes,
question. Yeah. Just, Richard, I enjoyed the presentation.
Absolutely.
The culture and language issues are very important and very interesting as you go internationally. And just all of the screenshots you showed are all in English, obviously. I mean, you said about 18 languages, I think you were talking
The
about.
Aggresso system, I think from memory, it has 18. But it doesn't have Mandarin, which is going to be a problem this year.
That obviously is a big issue the more you go overseas to try and...
Well, one of the things, I didn't talk about it there, but on one of the slides I showed project collaboration tools. And the particular tool that we tend to use on international jobs, has a multitude of languages. So we used it on a project in Paris. So the guys on our French clients can see the screens in French. They also had an office in Germany, and those guys saw the screens in German. So we're trying to dress it in particular ways.
Thank you.
And our financial people then can see the kind of the main Aggresso screen in various languages. But as I said, it doesn't cover all.
Richard, sorry, you mentioned, great presentation by the way.
Thanks.
You mentioned travel bills.
Oh yeah, I was looking at it the other day. I had to sit down after.
I was just wondering, in terms of the advancements that have been made in communication by the internet, Skype, meeting, has that not had an impact on?
Okay, I'll tell you.
On getting your people together.
Right, two particular things. If it takes, say, Skype first of all, it got loaded up on a high proportion of our 600 odd laptops. Not all of them yet. We're working through it. By and large, people don't use it. And people are so used to taking the mobile out of their pocket and dialing a number. So while the technologies are there, it doesn't mean people will always use it. The other thing that we're looking at the moment is potentially upgrading our video conference facility, which we may invest 200k in. That'll be a substantial investment. And what we're trying to do there is, from a technology point of view, make sure we can see people, which is obviously important on video conference, but we can also present documents and edit documents and do things online like that. So technology can have an impact, provided the management make sure it gets used. We people, we're very used to hopping on a plane. Like, our bill for flights and accommodation for international travel is north of 3 million in a year. So technology is all well and good if people will use it.
If I can comment as well, Richard, an awful lot of our travel costs now are BD related.
Yeah.
Because of the nature of things at the moment. And my experience would be that once you get to know people, if you're actually working a project, you can start to get into teleconferencing and video conferencing, and people become more comfortable
once you've made the face-to-face contact.
Face-to-face is essential in the business development context. And also, there are certain situations where people expect to see your face, and from a client's point of view, it doesn't matter to him whether you're, how much it costs you to get there, as long as he's not paying for it directly.
So the majority would still be kind of BD, kind of business development.
Business development, I don't think you'll ever really reduce that portion.
Sure.
You can reduce design coordination costs if you have a facility that will allow sort of the face-to-face contact. Once the relationship and the trust has been built, provided as well you can actually handle the whole document editing side of it.
All of that technology is there per se now.
The project coordination, you could reduce that proportion a bit. But I mean, even if we could drop it by 5%, it's a big chunk of change.
Yeah.
And a lot of it actually does depend on the culture of the organisations that you're relating to. I've experienced of clients who are absolutely happy to do everything by remote control. I'm working with Shell, for example, because they're an international company. We did, I would say, up to 3/4 of all our meetings, somebody would be on the phone because they wouldn't all be in the same place. But with other clients then, particularly companies that are more location specific, where everybody's together in the one place, they can't understand why you can't be there too. And we've had to change out personnel on projects where, it just didn't suit key people on our team to be located at the client site. The client just couldn't be happy unless they were there. So, you always have to read the situation and assess, is this one that we can do remotely, or is it one where we're going to have to face up? And I've had situations, particularly with reimbursable projects, where the client isn't inclined to believe that you're there at all unless they can see your face. We've had a situation where people have had to travel simply to be seen so that their billing will be credible at the end of the month.
And bear in mind, it sounds like a simple thing, but because we're trying to compete in different jurisdictions with local people, clients often don't think you're serious unless you're standing in front of them.
Yeah.
So there's an element of that as well.
But surely a lot of that travel would be, PM to PM.
Well, PM to PM we would try and minimise.
Right.
Certainly we should be trying to minimise that.
Sure. Yeah. Certainly the advancements in that element of technology are going to be massive for the next 5-10 years. Virtualization, all of this sort of stuff.
It's another topic for us.
It's another, people I think have only just come to the start of where that path's going to end. And in terms of that, I think a lot of that could probably will be incorporated in your PM to PM.
Okay.
Yeah.
If people want any further information, they can always contact me.
Just before, I'd just like to formally thank both Brian and Richard for 2 excellent presentations this morning. Thank you very much. If I may just wrap up the meeting a little bit ahead of schedule, I'll just put an image up there on the overhead of what we're just going to call now the new CITA Knowledge Series, which is the inaugural information booklet on knowledge management. Now, last year we did these pocket books, which were great little pocket books. You could flick through them having a cup of coffee. So we're going to do both those, and we're going to do a more intense document. So Richard and Brian have kindly agreed to sort of co-author it. And I don't want to hold you to ransom now, but I think PM might be giving us a small sponsorship stipend for that. But it's important that in that document that it will talk about what is knowledge management definitions, but both how it can be applied both in large, medium and small enterprises practically, and also what software maybe that we're aware of in the market, and in particular some case studies would be good. It would be good to get a small company, medium-sized, large company sharing with us their experiences there. And we're hoping to have a booklet for each one of the meetings that we're going to have this year. And that will be, and the students may notice as well, that the titles of the topics this year are right on top of the modules that they're doing. Now some of the modules, yes, some of the modules you've already done, Of course, you're the guinea pigs, don't forget, you're the first
Yeah.
crop. But these booklets will be available to the students and to the wider membership.